Welcome once again, everybody, to yet another podcast call with yet another guest, from our great continent. And today we have an interesting guest who we recently, their company sort of made waves with their partnership. But I think without further ado, I would like to introduce Victor Mapunga. Hi, Victor.
Hi, everyone. Hi, David. Pleasure to be here and to talk to everybody today about some of the work we do at FlexID. So I've been looking forward to this podcast for a bit of time now. So excited for it.
Indeed. Again, thank you for making the time to have this call, Victor. I know you're a busy man, obviously, but we really appreciate you taking the time to do this. But again, I think we can start with introductions. Let us know who you are, your background, about Zimbabwe, and how you got into the crypto space. Just a general feel of who you are.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Victor Mapunga. I was born and raised in a town called Mutare in Zimbabwe, which is near the border of Zimbabwe and Mozambique. One of the most beautiful places in the world, extremely mountainous, great weather, great people, very rich in knowledge, history, and also very rich in minerals. So it's called the Diamond City in Zimbabwe because that's where the majority of the country's diamonds come from. And it's really growing up in such an environment that, I had quite a lot of time, to sort of pursue different things when I was much younger. It was different from a bigger city like Harare. So it was very compact. And my parents, managed to send me to a good school, which is called Interest College. And it is there when I entered into, what most people call 8th grade, that I actually got introduced to programming. And, basically I was around 13 at the time. And, I just started going online, looking at a few courses. And before I knew it, I was like spending hours and hours and hours every single day writing different programs and experimenting. So I then got this, huge attachment to programming and technology at a very young age. And I progressed with that basically throughout my adolescence, when I was a teenager and when I was in high school. It was basically my hobby. I remember when I was about 15 or 16, we had this summer fair at high school, and we had to come up with projects. And I actually made a chatbot in Python, and very few people really sort of cared about it. So now when I see people, getting crazy over ChatGPT and stuff, it's always interesting to note, like, this stuff has come really far. But I was just I was really into that. I was really into technology, and I was thinking to myself, but what can I do in Africa? What can I do in Zimbabwe? And it's around the time I was 15 that I started my first startup, if you want to call it that. I didn't know what a startup was. But my cousin and I, we discovered this problem, which was a lot of students didn't have access to a lot of content and reading material in one place. So, right, if you wanted to study for like the exams, you had to like go through voluminous amounts of books. And what we did is we just built a platform, an e-learning platform, and we started just putting data there. An interesting thing is I actually didn't know back then what copyright was. So we were putting in a lot of information that we were probably not supposed to do. But, it got quite popular at the time. And, I really didn't put much effort into it really as a business. It was more of a hobby. But that was my first introduction into what I would call organizational building. And really my entrepreneurial career began from there. And I said to myself, I think I want to do this for the rest of my life. I think I want to build businesses. I think I want to build technology companies. And I started going online and looking for different programs and looking for just different opportunities that I could harness. And the first opportunity actually materialized when I was, ending my high school career, and I managed to get into a scholarship program at Yale University, which was on technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And that's when I went to the United States, and I think my world just blew up. because I was now, basically in the home of innovation as far as I was concerned. And, with a plethora of different students from around the world, I was really motivated. I found myself later, the next year at MIT, which is Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And I was at Sloan. And it's there that I met my would-be co-founder, who's also another Zimbabwean. And again, we managed to hit it off, and we had these big dreams and ambitions of what could we do back in Zimbabwe? What could we do back in Africa? How could we apply our skills and all these things that we're seeing on the continent to make it better? And in the end, we ended up actually coming back to Zimbabwe, and that is really when the story of FlexID itself then began.
All right, thank you, Victor, for that quite detailed background. I mean, I think Web3 space just fits people like you, right? I mean, you found a natural fit. But I love that background. It's always nice to see where people are coming from. Because that always, I believe, sets the pace for what you're going to do in future. I mean, Victor, let's dive deep into Web3 right now. Having grown up in Zimbabwe, studied abroad and came back. What's the state of Web3 right now in Zimbabwe, and maybe by extension a bit Southern Africa?
Yeah, so I always have a running joke. I say, I think Satoshi was a Zimbabwean, because it's only in Zimbabwe that the actual need for Web3 and the actual need for blockchain and crypto and technology would have materialized from. So as you know, in 2008, Zimbabwe had a massive problem of hyperinflation. I personally experienced it. I would see the price changing as I was standing in queue to buy something. It was terrible. People lost a lot of their savings, family, friends, relatives, you name it. It was a terrible time. And you'd have bricks of money in a wheelbarrow. So naturally, what happened is people became less trusting of centralized financial institutions. And when you don't have trust in financial institutions, people look for alternative methods of being able to perform transactions. So over here, we have what we call under the mattress banking, which basically means you don't take your money to the bank, you just keep it under the mattress at home. And it comes with a plethora of different problems. But because of that background, it became naturally easy for me to actually see what Web3 and what blockchain and what crypto had the potential to do. The really first time I was introduced to this, I remember I was at King's College in London, and I had a professor who decided to do a lecture on cryptocurrencies and blockchain. And I heard of it. I had read a little bit about it, but I really hadn't internalized it. And when we started speaking, I was the only person in the room who had so much context and understanding of the problems that necessitated this technology to arise. A lot of other people from the US, from Europe, from everywhere, they'll be like, this is a fad. We don't really think this is necessary. I can always use my Visa and MasterCard. And I'm trying to explain to these guys, like, that doesn't actually exist where I come from, Not everyone actually is going to have a Visa or MasterCard. And naturally dawned on me that there is some potential in this technology. But it's only when I came back to Zimbabwe that this became really apparent. And, the story of how we then got into FlexID is very simple. I walked into a bank trying to open a bank account once I was back there, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't easily do it. I couldn't give them some piece of paper called a proof of residence, which needed my name on it. And because my name wouldn't be on it, I needed to get an affidavit. I needed to get a lot of documentation just to prove that I actually live at a place I've lived my whole life. And I found that to be a bit absurd, especially when it came to trying to access financial services. I could easily open a Bitcoin wallet. Why couldn't I easily open a bank account? Why couldn't I easily register for insurance? Why couldn't I get some of these very necessary financial and economic services that traditionally, most people in our part of the world, they just like? And that is really when the story of FlexID organically came from. And, we just started experimenting in different ways in which how we could provide a solution. And it became naturally obvious that the reason why this problem wasn't solved as of yet is because the technology didn't exist, prior to the creation and prior to the commercialization of blockchain technology. This is a problem of centralization. This is a problem of trust. This is a problem of decentralization. It's a problem of scale, and it's a problem of speed, all of which fit naturally and perfectly within the ethos and founding philosophy of Web3 and fundamentally the entire blockchain ecosystem. And what FlexID is, in a nutshell, it's a self-sovereign identity wallet that runs on top of the Algorand blockchain. And what this means is that you, as David, we give you a wallet that allows you to interact with a host of multiple institutions that are able to issue you these digital credentials or verify those credentials if they want to onboard you for a service. So if you have an M-Pesa account and Safaricom did your KYC, they're able to actually give you your digital ID through your FlexID, and any other fintech, startup, crypto company that also wants to onboard you, they don't have to go through that repetitive process of trying to validate who you are or trying to validate your transactional history. If you are a vendor who exclusively gets paid via mobile money, it means that we are able to actually create that digital credential that shows your financial and transactional history. So you don't really need to have a bank account or a point of sale machine for you to actually have a financial track record, which could give you a credit score. The blockchain technology fundamentally allows us to do that at scale and in a very economic manner. And this is really, sort of where, the Web3 aspect of it came in. In terms of adoption, this side of the world, you find naturally in Zimbabwe, most people understand the need for blockchain. Most people understand the need for crypto. It's really the regulation and the policy, which is not clear and inconsistent, that has hindered what I would say is an emergence or a Cambrian explosion of different industries and companies. But from a consumer perspective, even from a business perspective, there is, a lot of demand for solutions that are able to allow people to be more transactional in a less friction emboldened way.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Victor, for that breakdown. I really loved the solution that you guys are building with a real need, a real use case. Just to help people understand, I know you've mentioned the state of Zimbabwe economy. Would you like to expound it a bit also as well, like what's the state of the economy right now? We read about hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, but we don't really understand what it means. Maybe you can break down to us what exactly that means.
So most people, when they hear about Zimbabwe, they remember the story of the wheelbarrows of cash, right? So that was 2008. And by the end of 2009, the problem was solved. The Zimbabwe essentially did something called dollarization, where the United States dollar became a circulating currency. So that got rid of hyperinflation. That only lasted up until 2013, 2014, when the government basically reintroduced the local currency. And around 2016, they introduced a local currency called a bond note, which basically was supposed to be a currency that was backed by some reserves. But because of the first problem I mentioned, the issue of trust, nobody trusted this currency. And when people don't trust a currency, it creates room for arbitrage opportunities. So the moment someone would get their salary in this currency, they would immediately try to get the US dollar equivalent. And what this naturally did, it created a parallel market where the exchange rate, instead of it being one-to-one or being fixed, it started basically creating a black market equivalent. And then it just started going up and up and up and up until the point we're at now, where we have inflation at around 232%. So currently it's Zimbabwe and Venezuela that are fighting for top spot in terms of inflation. And what this essentially means is that if you're a business and you earn money in Zimbabwean dollars, immediately the first thing you want to do is you want to get a forex, you want to get foreign currency. And by doing so, you basically create this market and this demand for that parallel market to exist. And this has basically resulted in sort of a very strange multi-currency system where informally, in the informal sector, there is massive circulation of of United States dollars. There's massive circulation of rands. There's circulation of gold. But in the formal sector, the government still pushes people to use the Zimbabwean dollar. So the Zimbabwean dollar is only useful for doing transactions in Zimbabwe. You actually can't pay your suppliers in China. You can't pay a foreign company in the Zimbabwean dollar. They won't accept it. So they'll say, you need to give us US dollars. And, that's the conundrum and financial situation that a lot of, people and ourselves, we find ourselves in. And there's quite room right now for solutions to be put in place, both in terms of policy, but most importantly, even in terms of how technology can come in and help navigate some of those very inconsistent waters.
All right, that's quite interesting. There are certain aspects I didn't know about Zimbabwe. So thanks for clarifying. I mean, in such an environment, then FlexID would flourish, right? A use case for FlexID seems natural. My question would be now, in regards to that, I know that you are selected as World Economic Forum Tech Pioneer, the first from Zimbabwe. Maybe you can let us know, how did that come about and how was that experience like?
Yeah. So it's been almost 2 years now. I actually got, recommendation from somebody who, decided to reach out to the World Economic Forum, and they said, you need to look into this company that's doing this, in digital ID and in blockchain. And they actually reached out to me. And the Tech Pioneers program is one of the most amazing programs in the entire world for companies. It has incubated, some of the world's biggest companies, including Airbnb, Uber, Spotify, and much more. And every year they select 100 companies from all over the world that they believe are going to be change makers and game changers in their various geographies and the world over. So in 2021, FlexID was selected, and we were the first company ever from Zimbabwe to join that program. With basically 99 other companies from around the world and 5 other companies from around Africa who are doing absolutely amazing things. And what this ecosystem has really allowed us to do is see the broader scope and potential of just how much we're able to scale this. You get to interact with individuals from all over the world, Southeast Asia, South America, and you realize that the problems we face here, a lot of them also exist in those parts of the world. And now you have an ecosystem of potential partners, ecosystem of policymakers, and you're able to attend events that traditionally would require you to be much higher up, even in public sector, to go for things like Davos. We're able to go there, and we're able to interact with policymakers on a one-on-one basis. We're able to interact with Fortune 500 companies. So there are many advantages, really. Now, I'd actually recommend, any other startup or company in Africa that really believes that, they would see a great fit in that, to join that ecosystem. And really, for me, it's been educational. I think that has been the biggest thing. As an entrepreneur, as a founder, you never really have the full picture. You always have to continuously learn. There's this like unstoppable force of continuous learning that you need to consistently envelop yourself in. So, one of the key things is, on a daily basis, I'm consistently getting information that traditionally would have just been hard for me to access, or, I wouldn't have even thought of accessing that. And that has really allowed our business, to be steered in a much more strategic direction, on top of just, the benefits of that ecosystem as a whole. So that really, for us, was a monumental moment. And I continuously participate and contribute in the digital ID aspect. And there's a lot of other initiatives that, I'm excited about, that are going to emerge from there.
All right. Again, yeah, congratulations on that, being the first Zimbabwean, to be selected. But I know that, it has not ended there. You've also gone ahead to, get grants, particularly from Algorand Foundation, as well as a safe investment in 2022. maybe you can give us a bit of insight into that and how, all this came about.
So Algorand is essentially the layer one blockchain developed by Turing Award winner Silvio Micali, who's a professor at MIT. And Algorand essentially is solves what's called the blockchain trilemma, which looks at decentralization, scalability, security. A lot of layer ones essentially struggle with that aspect. Either they're not decentralized enough, or if they're like Ethereum, the scalability is really limited because they're very expensive, right? So to deploy financial inclusion solutions that seek to onboard potentially billions of people, you need a layer one that is economically scalable, not one where you're paying gas fees of above even $1. Otherwise, it will just not scale. And security is a big aspect. We are talking about building the next generation of financial products. We're talking about building the next generation of identity. You want to build it on infrastructure that is extremely secure. And Algorand for us became a natural fit after having looked at multiple other chains. And we decided to build an Algorand from the time we started. And initially, we were able to actually get what's called a development grant back then, which basically allowed us to prototype the very, very first aspects of what we're trying to build and to validate whether or not it was technically possible to even do it at all. And the results were very promising. We're like, all right, it seems like we can actually do this. It seems we can actually build this solution on Algorand and actually deploy it. And we built it and we went into the market and we started basically looking for different partners. What a lot of people don't understand is when you look at investment across Africa, you're going to read a lot of stories about startups raising money, but there's really just like 5 economies out of the 54 countries in Africa that are getting the bulk of this money. So you look at, they're called the king economies. So you look at your Kenya, you're looking at, at Nigeria, you're looking at Ghana, you're looking at South Africa, you're looking at Egypt. That is where the bulk of the funding is going to. When you talk about a blockchain startup from Zimbabwe, a lot of people do not actually, conceptualize that is even possible. So that also means that as a founder, you can't actually rely on the potential of getting venture capital into your business. You really have to be scrappy about how you build your business. So we actually got our first commercial clients before we had actually raised any substantial capital. We really had to zone in on that. And the reason we chose Zimbabwe is, my co-founder and I, we're both from here. We speak the local language, and we really saw this market as a sandbox for FlexID because we understand FlexID is a global solution. But for us to test out, our market validation in a very economic way without spending so much money, it was perfect. And building a business is in basically one of the hardest economies in the world, where inflation is at 232%, where unemployment rate is around 90%. That is not easy. I would say it's probably the Olympics of entrepreneurship. And I respect even some of the other founders here because they understand just how enormously challenging the environment is, coupled with the lack of funding. But because of the traction and the progress we made last year, we did manage to raise our pre-seed round from the Algorand Foundation, which basically then gave us a substantial amount to basically then go to market far much more comprehensively. And the purpose of that funding really was for us to fully commercialize FlexID, start building out our sales pipeline. Because our business model is mainly B2B, we target institutions, so banks, healthcare companies, insurance companies, crypto companies, fintechs, government, you name it. We target those institutions to join our ecosystem so that when you use your FlexID, it actually has utility. You're not just going to use it one time and you never use it again. You're going to use it to open an account. You're going to use it to get insurance. You're going to use it to make a payment, e-commerce, etc. We want it to be a comprehensive and fully fledged identity. So the first part of building that is really building out the institutional infrastructure first, which was really what we started doing from last year. And it was very successful. I think one of our biggest implementations, which we recently did, actually happened in Sri Lanka. So FlexID Technologies itself, the company, is incorporated out of Singapore because we really saw the need for FlexID to be a global company. So when you speak about FlexID in Kenya or in Nigeria, we're able to get into those markets as well because of this global approach. And it's really because, having that funding, being able to build out our team and really being able to get out into the market and validate, that was very instrumental. And Algorand really has been, a great partner. We then participated in what's called the Algorand Miami Accelerator, which basically is a combination of Algorand and Borderless Capital and a few other investors that basically want to propagate the utility and the use case of the Algorand blockchain globally. So we participated in that accelerator, raised a little bit more funding with the purpose of now being able to raise a much larger seed round, where we fully now look at embarking and consolidating our key markets in Southern Africa before then branching out globally. So that really would never have happened if we didn't have sort of substantial backers that saw the potential in what we're doing, but most importantly, that also saw the potential for impact, right? So when we talk about Web3, we're not talking about a gimmick. We're not talking about just bringing people to speculative platforms. We're really talking about real people, real lives that want to earn money for their family, that want to, have these services, healthcare, insurance, and really having partners and investors that see that. It's always critical for any company. So that really, was the story of how sort of the funding structure started and where we are now.
All right, awesome. You mentioned a safe investment. For people who don't know what a safe investment is, mind clarifying that?
Yeah. So, basically when most people think of investment, right, they think someone is going to come in and then, they take certain shares in your company and then it's like a straight transaction like that. But for high growth technology companies, that is companies that want to continuously grow and continuously raise capital, there are new methods of financial instruments that allow you to raise that capital without, sort of overcomplicating the structure of your company. So basically, a SAFE is what's called a simple agreement for future equity, which basically means that when the investors come in, they come in at an agreed discount rate, whereby when we raise future rounds, they get a preferential rate to invest in the company at that discounted rate. So the major advantage for them and the major advantage for you as an entrepreneur is you're not giving up any substantial equity in the early stages of your business. However, you're able to get that capital and that capacity whilst creating a business structure that allows future investors to actually invest in your company. So, at pre-seed, seed stage round, that's typically the kind of structure you get. And obviously, as your company scales up to Series A, Series B, it becomes far much more complicated and far much more robust.
All right. Thank you for that insight as well. Victor, there's so much that you guys have done. I want to zero in on two specific partnerships. So one you've mentioned, but we'll circle back to that. But I want to touch on the recent partnership you guys announced with the Uhuru Wallet for an identity, a remittance platform. Tell us about that. And as you do that, tell us about the South Africa Zimbabwe remittance corridor. I've talked to Uhuru Wallet before. They've talked about that interesting corridor and the population that they serve. Maybe break it down to us how that looks like, how that partnership looks like, and how that corridor looks like.
Yeah. So Uhuru Wallet has become one of our major key partners, and it's also our first foray into multi-chain because it's actually built on Stellar. So it's also going to be the first time that FlexID builds an integration and a bridge into a different chain. And the company itself was founded by a very smart guy called Trust Jakarasi, who's also a Zimbabwean, but he's based in South Africa with a lot of experience in banking. And his analysis and his theory is very simple, which is if you have diasporans that are working in a particular foreign market, but those people have to pay, 10, 15, and upwards of 20% to send money back home. Then, what that creates is a bottleneck for them, but more so for the country that is actually receiving this funding, because a substantial amount of it is kept by massive companies, existing already within the remittance space. So majority of the companies that dominate remittance, are Western based, and, they charge you a flat commission rate that at times can be, absolutely catastrophic. So South Africa is the biggest country with Zimbabwean foreigners or Zimbabwean diasporas. So you have over 1 million Zimbabweans that work in South Africa. The numbers range from 1.5 million all the way to 3 million Zimbabweans in South Africa. But both governments never really want to acknowledge how, exactly how many people they are. And for the simple reason that a lot of these guys, they operate within the informal sector. So they're not legal. You have quite a number of people over there that basically settled in that country without the right paperwork. So when you are an illegal foreigner, as some people would like to say, it means several things. Number one, you actually can't interact with the formalized economy because you are illegal. So you can't get the necessary permits, you can't get the necessary paperwork. So you exist in this fringe economy where you are forced to transact in cash and you are forced to transact via proxies. So you transact via other people. Other people pay for your stuff because maybe they have the permits, maybe they're citizens, maybe they have the cards, maybe they have the bank accounts. And it makes life for you much more expensive. Added to this, you have this almost financial obligation back home where you need to send money back home on an annual basis. And this, in this corridor is worth over $1 billion annually, where people are just sending money back and forth. Even in some cases, they actually just put money on a bus, and then the bus crosses Beitbridge border, and someone picks up the money in Harare, in Bulawayo, or in any other of the cities. And this is very archaic, right? This is extremely archaic. It's very expensive. And most importantly, it means that both of the countries don't actually know what's happening in that sector. It means private sector doesn't also know who these people are, how much they earn. Someone could be working in South Africa as a maid and they get their monthly income, but they can't actually go to a microfinance and borrow because that data is not captured anywhere, because they don't have a pay slip, right? They operate in that informal sector. So the combination of Uhuru Wallet and FlexID, what it allows us to do is two main things. Number one, it allows us to provide these immigrants with the payment rails for them to be able to send money more affordably back home. And most importantly, it now gives them an identity layer where we don't care whether or not they are legally there or they are informal, right? At the end of the day, we see how much transactions they send back home. We're able to generate these digital credentials for them, and we allow third parties to now feed into that data and be able to provide services to those people. So what we're really envisioning is a local microfinance back in Zimbabwe is able to give a loan to a Zimbabwean in South Africa based on their FlexID credentials. A bank is able to even open bank accounts back here in Zimbabwe for people that are based in South Africa but earn an income. And you're using that remittance data to essentially be able to come up with those different financial products. And because FlexID is decentralized, it means it's at the permission of these users for them to expose that data to whoever they want to expose that data to. That is what we mean by self-sovereign ID, meaning you as David give permission to whoever you want, verify and validate your data if you want to access a service from them. So really that partnership is aims to sort of provide a much more innovative solution to how immigrants are traditionally treated world over. If we solve this for Zimbabwe, South Africa, we can solve this for basically any other market. You can think of Mexico, America. You can think of, I'm not sure who's your biggest immigration partner in Kenya. Maybe it's Uganda, maybe it's someone else, right? And you're you are able to now know, okay, this is how many Kenyans are here. This is how many Kenyans are in Britain. This is how many Kenyans are in America. And this is how much they send. So it's no longer just about, oh, let's build a remittance platform to capture their money. It's let's build a remittance platform that dignifies them, is able to curate that data, and is able to allow them to now access numerous financial services based on the fact that they are consistent remittance of money back home.
Wow, this is amazing. I think what I'm getting with FlexID is solving a problem that goes beyond just a remittance issue, especially with the South Africa-Zimbabwe corridor, because like you mentioned, I think this is a bigger problem. A lot of the remittances, informal remittances, are quite informal, and it's deliberate. People don't want to be formalized, right? So it would be interesting to see how you guys scale this. I don't know which other markets you guys are looking at, starting with African, possibly with Asia, very similar to the South Africa-Zimbabwe corridor. I don't know which other markets that you guys feel this is the next market that we are going to look at, with this solution.
So over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll be consolidating our base in Southern Africa, especially in South Africa. And why South Africa? Because South Africa is almost the best of both worlds. They have a highly formalized economy, but they also have a massive informal economy. And then you do have this large plethora of immigrants from Zimbabwe, from Nigeria, from Congo, from Mozambique. So it really provides you a test bed for what this solution would look like in the home countries of a lot of these people. Naturally, we're going to scale to East Africa. After Southern Africa, we're naturally going to get into East Africa. So definitely places like Kenya, places like Uganda, where a lot of Web3 activity has been happening. These are some of the key markets we're really going to be championing ourselves in. Tanzania, massive market opportunities for us as well. And obviously, you can't go wrong with Nigeria, which is basically Africa's largest market by population, but also just in terms of human capital, right? Africa is more than just the raw numbers of people that are able to use your product or service. We really want to create a platform that is able to fully capitalize off the human potential in sub-Saharan Africa. And what that means is that engaging with partners in these different countries that have the same ethos but have been able to successfully navigate those local markets. Our business model is very collaborative. So we get into a market, and our key thing is, who do we partner with? Who do we work with? Who can be an issuer on our platform? Who can be verifiers? Who can even be our sales partners? So we're actually going to be rolling out during the middle of this year, and this is still very early stage, but we're going to be rolling out a sales program that is going to allow us to actually allow third parties to come into the FlexID ecosystem and become some of our sales and sales channel partners. So if you're in Kenya, if you're in Egypt, if you're wherever, if you're in Rwanda, and you want to champion FlexID in your country, you'll be able to actually do that, and we'll provide you an end-to-end comprehensive platform that allows you to go from A to Z to actually onboard institutions and individuals. So we have that collaborative mindset in place, and we always look for organizations and individuals that have that capacity to deliver. The reason we actually did the one in Sri Lanka is because our COO, our Chief Operating Officer, he's actually based in Southeast Asia, and he was able to actually successfully set up that model where we're able to actually partner with somebody and we're able to get inroads into a particular market, and we really want to replicate that across the whole region and eventually across the whole world.
Indeed. In fact, now just moving into that Sri Lankan partnership, let's dive deep into that. How did that come about? For people who don't know, FlexID partnered with Sri Lanka's National Savings Bank, which happens to be the first South Asia's sovereign identity solution. But tell us a bit more about that and how it came about.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting project and initiative. So National Savings Bank is the third largest bank in Sri Lanka. They're owned by the government. So they basically have a lot of public sector institutions and infrastructure in their ecosystem. And the proposition was very simple. How do you allow someone to walk into a post office and they're able to open a bank account, they're able to access all these financial services wherever, if they're in the rural areas, wherever they are? This is because, the bank itself has a limited number of bank branches, but they have thousands of distribution points via, that postal office infrastructure and via that government infrastructure. And where FlexID comes in is we actually allow a person to walk into that post office. They submit their national ID or some other form of identification, and the FlexID is generated from them. So a digital wallet is created, and an electronic version of their KYC information is immediately sent and uploaded onto their wallet. Now, when this individual wants to further access more of NSB services, they're just basically doing that using the same digital ID. If they come into the city and they want to access much more comprehensive solutions, they never have to fill in any paperwork. If they want to access some of NSB's merchants or third-party partners, the same thing happens. They're able to share their digital ID for them to be able to get access to those particular services. And indeed, this is the first time a self-sovereign ID solution has gone live in Southeast Asia, which we see as a very, very sort of huge milestone. And we really hope that across that region, we're able to onboard far much more institutions in Sri Lanka, in India, in Bangladesh, and other countries that are within that region. But, having, a a bank of that size, being able to adopt a solution that originally came from Zimbabwe, we saw that as a massive achievement. And I think the whole team put in a lot of work. Our team in Asia also put in a lot of work to make sure that comes to fruition. And now we have the model, and we really believe we can take this model anywhere, and we're able to really replicate with the other institutions. So we're really looking forward to onboarding those users. And our target metrics, they are simple. NSB in total has over 5 million clients, and all of them over the next 18 months, we'll be rolling them onto the platform, and they'll have their digital IDs created via FlexID. So that has been, or rather, this is currently an exciting initiative that we've embarked on.
Indeed, I mean, congratulations on that. I think that was quite big news even from my end. I think when you shared the press release and we ran it, we're still getting hits from it from across the continent. So I think congratulations on that milestone. Just zeroing in on that, I mean, how big of a problem is digital or IDs in Sri Lanka for this solution to actually be taken up by such a big bank?
The problem of identity generally is a massive issue globally, right? Identity is, the lack of identity affects over 1.7 billion people globally. In places like the Congo, they only register about 25% of all birth registrations, right? And this is a country with close to 100 million people. No one actually knows how many people are in the Congo because the majority of them have no IDs, right? So it's a very difficult problem. And in places like Southeast Asia as well, you would think this problem has been solved, but it hasn't. You have people that currently live on some of these isolated islands where, the cost of building a bank for them or building a bank branch is so high that the banks are just not going to do it, right? So those individuals then face massive financial exclusion because of the cost of doing business. With FlexID, and you give FlexID to a platform like the National Savings Bank, they're able to convert something that was dying, which is a post office, into basically an identity center where you get in and you now have access to this portal of different services that are going to gradually allow you to climb up that socioeconomic ladder. So in Southeast Asia, you do have one of the largest numbers of people without IDs. And in Asia in general, this number is still pretty high. Most people don't know this, but in countries like China, you still have over 700 million people in China living in rural areas. Okay, so they live in rural areas. In India, a country of over 1.5 billion people, it's more than 800 million people that currently live under these kind of conditions. So in some cases, you might have a basic ID, but it doesn't really allow you to do much. You can't really access those financial services. You can't access, that healthcare. So we really are looking forward to making this as a sustainable case study that then champion and aggressively push into those markets once the company itself has grown to that capacity. It's not cheap to try and get into the markets. And one of the things we also try to tell investors is we are not just shooting all over the world. We really have a focused plan on how we're going to scale the company. I think for us, Sri Lanka proved that FlexID is more than just an African solution. It's more than just an African company. It's a global company. I get requests from people in Brazil, in Argentina, in Mexico that want FlexID in South America. I get requests from people in the Middle East, that want FlexID in their country. So really, it's about us sort of making sure that we build the company to enough capacity and have that strategic alignment, ensuring that we're able to then scale to these regions, but in a very sustainable and in a very pragmatic way.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing, Victor. You're doing a great job. Again, just zeroing in on FlexID. So if someone comes, say, into a post office and they want to have an ID system set up, how long does it take to do that with FlexID?
Yeah, so this is the awesome part. It depends how fast you're able to type. Or if you're using our WhatsApp chatbot, you're going to be done in like 5 steps. Right. And that could just take you. I know when our CTO did the first demo and, he was able to actually do the passport verification and all that. He did that in under 2 minutes. And that was it impressed quite a lot of people. So I would say on average 5 minutes max. If you consider that some people might not be as fast. If you're dealing with an elderly person who might need just a little bit more time, but in under 5 minutes, you're going to have your FlexID wallet set up, and it's going to have a version of your electronic KYC, and you're able to start sharing that with any third parties that you want to. So we really want to make sure that if it's a millennial or it's a Gen Z, in like a minute, in like 2 minutes, okay, you should have your FlexID done. And you should be able to then start accessing a plethora of different services, because speed is important. So the average time it takes, when I try to open a bank account, and I still open accounts up to now in Zimbabwe, and they still take so much time. It can take you anywhere from a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks for that account to get opened. So imagine you automate that process. And that in that account verification is happening in under 5 minutes. That for the bank and even for the individual is a massive, achievement, both in terms of time and also in terms of the economic advantage of cost. So really, and it costs less than 5 US cents to do this per individual, compared to the current cost of doing KYC, which ranges from $1.20 all the way up to $5 per ID per individual, and we've reduced that to under 5 US cents. And that is a massive disruption in terms of pricing as well. And we hope to really scale that up to other regions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can imagine the possibilities for this, not just in the banking or financial system, but really across the board. So my thinking is once, you get these ideas, and you're able to build a database, it's easy to scale this into other industries, right? I mean, do you envision that as well? Not just working with banks, but also other entities, private institutions, companies. Do you see that happening?
So we've already implemented FlexID in healthcare. which is one of our biggest use cases actually. So we partnered up with the company called Ubuntu Clinics, which has a tremendous founder who's basically looking at building out a decentralized healthcare solution. So building out these clinics in remote areas. And traditionally, your health records are kept in a counter book. We have these things called counter books here, massive books, maybe 500, 600 pages. And, the clinic basically stores people's information in that format, which is really not sustainable. It means that you don't have a portable version of your health record. It means every time you want to do a diagnosis on yourself, you have to come in with that paperwork. And if you lose that paperwork, you have to go through that re-diagnosis again, which can be expensive in our part of the world. And FlexID has been successfully implemented to allow for the issuance of medical credentials, so prescriptions, health records, etc. And now we're looking at really scaling it up to look at insurance as well, and really be able to start performing even some analytics on that. So FlexID has multiple use cases. If you go on our website, you find out that we have use cases in education, universities. They can start issuing out these digital transcripts. So I know for a fact that you did go to the University of Nairobi or wherever, right? Like for a fact that this person went there. Unlike on LinkedIn, where anyone can just say anything about themselves. I went to Harvard. Right. And then, but maybe Harvard is there, a local community college nearby. So, you want to ensure that the credentials people provide even for remote job opportunities, which is a massive industry also happening. So a lot of young Africans are already doing remote work, but how do we make sure they're more competitive compared to their peers in India, compared to their peers in Eastern Europe? Is you want to make sure that when companies look at their profiles, that immediately within a few seconds, they have full assurance that this is a real person. Unlike, what you have now, you see an application from Nigeria, you're like, can I even trust this person is real? Which is the perspective a lot of people in Western markets really have about Africa. So you want to provide the tools that make it easier and increase transparency, but also increase the trust in the institutions here and the people that come from those institutions. That over time will allow us to open up the African market to global companies that seek to do business with us because they actually trust us. They trust that the data we provide them is accurate, it's verified, and that it wasn't tampered with. So FlexID, our main goal is that these use cases are actually implemented by third-party developers. We are looking for startups that are eventually going to build on FlexID. Later this year, we're going to do a hackathon in South Africa. And, we're going to have some students be able to actually start building out some solutions on top of that. That's our main goal. For FlexID to become almost the operating system of identity in Web3. We want it to be in your app, in your fintech app, in your e-learning app, in your health tech app. We want it to be embedded in every sector of your life and really of whatever company you build.
All right, great. Thanks for that, Victor. Can't wait to see how you guys grow FlexID. So now, as we conclude, I wanted to ask a personal question as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's been in the Web3 space for a while. What advice would you give to fellow Web3 entrepreneurs, particularly in Africa, who are building amidst the challenges that we face as Africans, amidst funding challenges, scaling challenges, and just regulatory challenges? What sage advice would you give to your fellow Web3 entrepreneurs?
Yeah, the first thing definitely would be always focus on the use cases that your people need, not what global investors and the global media talk about. We understand better what the problems our communities face. We understand better the problems our governments have. We understand better the challenges our economies have. So when you build a solution in Web3, do not immediately rush to start building NFT applications that someone in Soweto doesn't really care about. They want a simple solution that might allow them to have much better access to insurance or much better access to microfinance. Those are the things that are going to scale because there's billions of of us Africans, and there's billions of more people in South America and in Southeast Asia that also have the problems. The second one is definitely to not give up. I think building out from Zimbabwe, I have faced every single imaginable obstacle and challenge you can imagine. I could get on calls with investors. The moment I say Zimbabwe, their faces change. You can tell they are not going to invest in us, but that should not stop you from continuously engaging. That should not stop you from persevering. We've been on the brink of death more times than I can imagine. And my fundamental belief is if you're building in Africa, it's impossible to die. Because you can always find a way, and always find a way. There is always a way out of whatever situation you're in, even if it's financial and you have absolutely no runway left. Definitely scale down, continuously engage your ecosystem. Eventually you will get that traction. And last but not least, definitely always think big. Always think bigger than your country, think bigger than your neighborhood, think big, because it's only when we have, Herculean goals and visions that we're able to achieve these Herculean tasks. If you were to ask me in the first days of FlexID whether or not I foresaw us implementing this solution in Asia, I would have probably told you, I don't think so, because these people in Zimbabwe aren't even listening to me. They understand how someone in Asia will pay attention. But it's only when you then have that level of confidence, that level of, just that persevering spirit of never giving up, that you're able to do things that traditionally people would say are impossible. So yes, it's very possible for us to build the Web3 companies that are going to be in America, that are going to be in Europe, because majority of what's being built out there is really speculative, and it's not really targeted at problems that people really have. So really always continuously focus on building solutions that people need. They should feel like, I need this in my life. And if you do that, you are guaranteed to have success. Just stay in there and continuously build. Never stop building, no matter what's happening. Even if there's a riot in your city, build. If they throw, a canister or a tear gas in your room, just throw it back out and continuously build. So, yeah, that's what I'll put forward.
It's funny you mentioned that, because currently in Kenya we are having these Monday riots. So it's ironical that you talk about riots and building. But
you see, being an African means you're building in the hardest of circumstances. So imagine what happens when you go to an easier market. You are just going to dominate, because you are used to problems, you are used to war, you are used to this tough environment. If I put you in a simple market, you are definitely going to make it.
So Victor, we could talk for another hour. This was so informative. I believe our listeners will also really appreciate the gems of knowledge that you've dropped today. I've learned a lot. I would definitely love to have another conversation at some time, not just about FlexID, but also just about your experience as an entrepreneur. I think there's a certain depth that entrepreneurs, especially Web3 entrepreneurs, bring to the ecosystem. And I think you're just one of those people. Again, thank you so much for this discussion. For people who want to learn more about FlexID, where can they go to and how can they reach out?
So go to our website. So that's www.flexid.io. You can also go to flexid.asia. You can also go to Flex Fintech. So Flex, then FINTX.com. And you're going to find a lot of information on Twitter. I'm available at Victor_Mapunga. And you can find a lot of content there, and you can follow us as well at FlexID Official on Twitter as well. So you're able to get a lot of comprehensive. YouTube is a great platform as well. I think I've done 1 or 2 talks there where I really explain FlexID in detail. So you can go on YouTube, just search Victor Mapunga FlexID. You should be able to get some videos where you can actually learn about some of the stuff and use cases that we've brought to the market. So yeah, there's a lot of ways of reaching out to us, and I'm looking forward to speaking to anyone in Web3, finance, insurance, healthcare, fintech. Always looking forward to it. Reach out. We are a very collaborative company, and we're a very accommodating group of people. So looking forward to everyone who's going to actually reach out.
Awesome. Nice way to close this discussion. Thank you.